Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Family Matters. My name is Purity Museo, and tonight we want to just look at the country's preparedness on coronavirus. But just before that, let's get an overview of how the infections have spread around the world, and Thailand has become the latest country to report its first death from coronavirus as the outbreak continues to spread around the world, with more than 86,000 people infected. On Saturday, several European countries announced new cases, and Iran revealed another jump in infections, and Qatar became the latest Middle Eastern country to report its first case. South Korea, which is grappling with the largest outbreak of the virus outside China, has urged citizens to stay indoors, warning of a critical moment in the spread of the infections. And Nigeria was also the very first sub-Saharan country, African country, to report the first case, which involved an Italian that had traveled from Milan to the country. There is, of course, also an alert in all nations in the country, and WHO has said that African nations do not have any capacity to contain the virus. Anyway, this week, the head of state did give a directive that by Friday next week, which is the lapse of the 7 days he had given the newly formed National Response Committee, that Mbagathi Hospital should be operational. So when we talk about Mbagathi Hospital being operational, fully equipped, are we talking about the equipment? Are we talking about the health professionals? Or even, do we have any preventive measures that should be put in place? In studio to put all this into perspective, next to me is Boaz Onchari, who is a nurse, and at the same time, he is the chairperson for the Kenya National Union of Nurses, Nairobi branch. Welcome to the show,
Thank
Boaz.
You.
And then next to Boaz is Alfred Obengo, who is the chair for the National Nurses Association of Kenya. And of course, these are the professionals that deal with patients directly. Alfred, it's nice to have you on our show tonight. All right, so we've looked at, Boaz, let me start with you. We've looked at the spread of this virus. It's spreading very fast, and of course, some countries and even the city where it began is on lockdown. From what we are seeing, maybe from a medic's perspective, you can let us understand how deadly is coronavirus, or the seriousness of this virus, when you're comparing to what other nations have done and how it's affected people in other nations.
Thank you, Purity, for having me in studio. I want to start by saying that it is very unfortunate. As we speak, corona, as it is, it's dangerous by even the word. You can see even the developed countries, how they are struggling to ensure that they try to contain it. So that is how dangerous it is. We are in a third world country. When we talk on how prepared we are, I don't know what it means. Kenya, to be particular, we are not prepared. That is the truth of the matter.
All right.
Yes.
And of course, Alfred, Kenyans have been saying that the country is not prepared, and of course, anchored by some decisions being made. And even WHO says it's a new virus, and still cure and treatment for this. The researchers and scientists are really working hard on that. When we talk about Kenya is not prepared, are we talking about the capacity? Are we talking about the human resource, the equipment? What exactly? And when we say Kenya is not prepared, is there any nation in the world that is prepared?
Thank you, Purity. The mode of transition, let me start from there.
Yeah.
The mode of transition of coronavirus is what makes it very, very dangerous. Because in any natural environment, you must cough, you must sneeze, and you must sweat. And after that, you must shake each other's hands. So that's the mode of transmission of coronavirus. So that makes it a very dangerous virus. In terms of preparedness, China grappled with it when it broke out in China. And you can imagine the economic status of China as you compare it to Kenya or Africa. So these are very, very big challenge to Kenya as a nation. And I just want to say very, very strongly that we must come together as a nation to ensure that our citizens are protected and cushioned
All right.
Yes.
And in readiness for this preparation, what are some of the roles that the health professionals, especially, of course, we know nurses, should be playing, or what is their role in the control or even prevention of coronavirus in the country?
As it is, we even don't know what the role of nurses will be. One, I've told you that there is no preparedness. As we speak, I don't know of any nurse in Nairobi County who has been trained on how to respond to such case, should it arrive. So I really don't know if the preparedness from the government side, whether they are talking in terms of equipment, but as a union, we are looking at our nurses. Are they prepared? And if they're prepared, how many have been prepared? How prepared are they in terms of prevention, sensitization, and the equipment that they're going to use? Yes.
Tell us more about how nurses, how you feel, because you're saying no nurse has been trained. Nurses require training. What kind of preparations do they require to deal with this virus in case, God forbid, in case a case is reported in the country?
Purity, let me break it down to even a simple cholera case that we handle even in our institutions. Even that one requires a training. You need to know the kind of beds you have. You need to know how the decontamination goes about. You need to know the protective gears and how to handle that client. As we speak, this is corona. This is not even the cholera that kills. This is not malaria that kills. This is cholera. I mean, this is corona, which we even don't know, and we have no expertise on how to go about it as we speak. Yeah, that is why I'm saying we are not prepared in terms of the human resource. We may have the equipment by Friday as the president ordered, but we have the human resource in terms of the nurses, the doctors, even the clinicians, including even the cleaners. Because in an institution, a setting that will require an isolation, we must have all those guys to work all around as a team to ensure that everyone who is there is protected, and at the end of the day, maybe that client to get the services he or she required.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And Alfred, when he talks about that the nurses are not ready, they have not been trained, for instance, because Kenyans are afraid when this happens, because it's, you said the mode of transmission of this virus is very scary and it's worrying because it's when someone coughs. So do you share the same fears, health professionals, as a common mwananchi? We need to know where we are.
We want to say very strongly and very firmly that on this matter, the voice of the nurse must be heard. And I'm saying this because, and you have no apologies for saying that, it must be heard because the first contact when a patient comes to the hospital is a nurse. When you walk into an emergency department, accident and emergency department, in layman language it's called casualty. The first contact will be a nurse. So that means that we are the front line of danger and risk. That's why our voice must be heard. If you mishandle the nurses in this situation, you mishandle everything in the clinical environment. So, and that calls now for capacity building. We must be equipped, we must be trained. Our capacity must be enhanced. And that must not just be said in press conferences. It must be seen to be done. And we want to commend and appreciate so much the executive order from His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya. Actually, his executive order went a long way to calm the anxiety that had gripped the psyche of the nation. Because before his order, the country was like, there's nothing that is being done. So we want the relevant authorities to move further and implement and ensure that as the president directed, that's what is done. I'll wish to, because I...
talk about this voice of the nurses that you're saying, the voice of the nurses has to be heard. What are some of these issues that you feel should be dealt with first before the country should say that it's prepared in case of an outbreak?
That's very simple.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an emerging and a new disease. We must be equipped with knowledge and then protective garments and equipment. And this just don't come. We must be taken through some of these lessons and education. So, and as of now, we've only had statements. So we want the nurse to be equipped with the necessary protective gear and knowledge. That's what we're talking. That's the voice of the nurse, because it's a situation whereby, you know, in Occupational Safety Act, they say that safety begins with you. So you cannot actually cushion or make a client or a patient safe if you yourself, you are not safe. So that's why the authorities, the government must first talk to us, the nurse and other players in the clinical environment to make them safe first. Yes.
Let me stay with you. A nurse is actually able to identify these cases. I know there are some of the signs and symptoms that have been highlighted by WHO, but realistically speaking, a nurse is able to identify when a patient walks in that they are able to single out, I think these signs and symptoms could be coronavirus or similar.
Yeah, as of now, because of the signs and symptoms, they're also related to other ailments that also come to accident and emergency. But when we realize that given you the clinical presentation and diagnostic process that we use, that you may be a suspect, definitely you are taken through that rigorous laboratory tests and stuff. So this is where now we come in, because it's a new ailment. Our competencies must be enhanced so that we handle the same.
Yeah.
And I want to repeat that, not repeat, but to add that the new CS, Honorable Mutai Kagwe, it's unfortunate that he's being baptized by fire, because he has just come to a ministry and there's you can say a crisis. So I will strongly urge him. We know he's someone who is very hands-on because of his past. I'll humbly ask him that tomorrow, when you report to office, visit these areas that are being set to handle these cases. Go to Mbagathi and other hospitals to ensure that what is being said is being done.
Yeah, and actually that brings us to the next discussion. Boaz, you have your members in specifically Mbagathi Hospital. Let's talk about Mbagathi Hospital. You know, the head of state said by Friday it should be fully operational. Is that possible according to the nature of the hospital and of course the wing that was chosen to be an isolation wing for any cases of corona? Paint a picture about the hospital.
From where we sit, I may not speak for the institution, but I want to speak for a nurse who works at that institution.
Right.
And what I want to say is that whether the institution is set to handle the corona cases, even by today midnight, the biggest worry and concern is the protection and the safety of the health workers and even the clients who are already in that institution. As a union, we have visited, because when you hear that there's something that will be done in a certain institution and you know your members are there, you need to be on the ground to see if actually your members are protected. There are so many things that could be happening in Mbagathi. You remember this is a building that was actually housing the maternity wing, including the NBU. Sometimes back it had challenges. Then services had to be transferred to another building so that this one to undergo renovations. Now from our angle, our nurses continue to suffer while handling mothers from a small cubicle labeled maternity, when we are actually looking at how can they fast track the process of renovation. Then we have our mothers and our clients enjoy the services at the maternity. Yes, corona has come. This is the side that maybe was identified. But then the biggest challenge, has sensitization been done to the people on the ground? The answer is no. Not even a single nurse from that institution will tell you that he or she has the knowledge on how to handle a client. If any person is now seen near the gates of that institution wearing a mask, I'm telling you, everybody will be on the run.
Even the nurses.
Even the health workers, even the nurses will be on the run. As my brother Alfred has said, your health and your safety comes first. So if you've not trained a nurse that should you come into contact with this person, this is the first thing that you need to do. Even when an accident occurs on the road, you don't just rush that now I know how to save life, let me rush. Look at the surrounding. Are you safe before you start saving the rest? So even with what we have at hand is actually practical at Mbagathi Institution. Let the government move with speed. They have 4 or 5 days to go before the deadline on which the presidential order. Let them look for ways and engage the health workers on the ground.
Yeah.
And on this case, based on what we're getting, it is just to empower every health worker, not even nurses alone, health workers, but then let them merge on the nurses because as my brother, and I'm repeating what my brother said, the nurses are the first to come into contact with these guys.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if that one is not handled, the human resource aspect is not handled, then even if we have good machines, we set up ICU, that building is well decorated with everything that we require. If we don't have human resource equipped, trained to handle such cases, then it is good as nothing.
Yeah. Allow me to ask you this other question. When we talk about equipping Mbagathi Hospital, of course, you've talked about nurses being trained, but again, you visited the specific wing that is going to be set aside for isolation cases in case of any case is reported in the country. So are we looking at seeing some constructions going on, that will be going on, equipment being brought in? Of course, you talked about human resources. What exactly are we looking at before we could say, now Mbagathi Hospital, this particular wing is now set for any case, for isolation? It's now an isolation case.
Fine. I don't think they're going to put up another building.
Yeah.
That is a fact. There is already a building that was under renovation. So what actually is being done is now they're trying to, what is missing in terms of equipment that they need to equip. We are measuring on the issue of human resource. And in this area, we are protecting our nurses. We understand very well that they haven't been trained. And that is why I'm insisting on the issue of training and empowering them. We don't want just a case comes and then the nurses are being bulldozed. You come and handle this case. And they are not in a position to handle. Yes. So that is why even if they are going to do everything they could in terms of putting us a well-equipped isolation set at Mbagathi Hospital, we need to see and know and actually come to terms. Let them have facts that these are the numbers we have trained, they are able, and they are willing. You see, there's also willingness.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can train someone who is unwilling. So at the end of the day, you will not achieve what you intended.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. And Obengo, the government has said, of course, through the National Response Committee that was formed, that it's going to ensure, in partnership with county governments, that there are response centers built across the country in every county. I think that's goodwill on the part of the government. Maybe what we should be talking about now, as both of you are saying, is human resource, right?
You know, we are trained to save lives.
Yes.
I want to say that. And that is our core duty when you're in the clinical environment. And I also want to say this very strongly, that we are also ready and willing to support the government initiatives in whatever measures they are taking. And I've said it, and I want to repeat it here, that in our actions, in our statements, let us be very careful as we make our statements of action in a way that we don't escalate the anxiety and expose our people, to make them more vulnerable. And when I say this, I still go back to the statement from the president. As now we are aware, there are those, what was making the populace so anxious on the issues of flights that are coming in and borders. We are told that that one has now been stopped, which is a very important assurance from the president.
Yeah.
Back to our ministry, we can assure Honorable Cabinet Secretary that we are going to support him in the measures that he's going to undertake. I'm told that from tomorrow they are starting trainings both in the county and national governments for the health personnel. And when you talk about health personnel, as much as we say that the nurses are on the front line, we also work as a team. So we have the doctors, the clinical officers, laboratory officers, and these are the core people who handle this disease process. We are aware that trainings are going to be started. Some have, they say have been started, but what I can say with certainty is that from tomorrow there are trainings that are going to go both at the national level and at the county level.
Yeah.
To equip them, as we've said before, with the requisite competencies, knowledge, and skills to handle this deadly virus.
All right. And from all the issues that you're talking about, Boaz, so are Kenyans justified to freak out, you know, because coronavirus has been, of course, trending, and Kenyans have been really questioning and asking so many questions. So are Kenyans justified first to really get scared over this outbreak?
Yeah, they should get scared.
Yeah.
That is, once you're scared, then you'll take precautions. By taking precaution is to ensure that the environment you are in, whatever signs and symptoms one may present with, it is good too. So when you'll be scared, you'll be able to come up with a solution in terms of what you are undergoing. Yeah. But then the most important thing under all this that is happening is now the presidential order. That order is very important. And I believe it came just in time, because the president may have information that actually what I'm being told is not what is on the ground. Then I need now to give orders. So even as they implement this order, let them do what is called sensitization, not only to health workers, now to the Kenyans. Yes. You see, the scary is we have the persons who have come in, they have come as suspects. We haven't confirmed. Suppose they stay with us and then it is confirmed otherwise. What next? Okay? They were talking of self-quarantine.
Yes.
I've been out for 6 months. I'm home to see my kids, to see my wife, to see my brothers, my mother, and then you're telling a Kenyan to self-quarantine. Is it logical?
But we have South Korea that has told its citizens to stay indoors. Or when you talk about self-quarantine, should that be monitored as well? Or we should not be talking about self-quarantine in the country?
The best that they could have done, this is my opinion, or those people who traveled in, they could have been put at a separate place before they left JKIA. Leaving someone to take a Uber or a Matatu until home, and then you're telling that person, now you stay in your house for 14 days or so, I don't think it is practical.
All right. Yes. But on the same note, actually today the committee said that they know these people. Of course, there have been screenings going on at JKIA. If what the government or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been saying is anything to go by, probably they said they know where these people are, they know their status, and so there's nothing to worry about. Should we? Is it because he's saying telling them to self-quarantine is not practical? Alfred, maybe what do you say about that?
You know, you cannot compare our systems with Korea and China. We all know that we are a developing country. Our systems are still a bit weak. We have a situation whereby even obeying traffic rules is a problem for some of us. So in a situation like this, when you are handling such a dangerous virus, you want to leave it at the discretion of someone, whether to go to the shop or not to go to the shop. I think that's a bit casual. So we need to apply more stringent measures insofar as quarantine is concerned. And when you talk about scientific quarantine, you cannot equate it to a social quarantine where you lock up your son or your daughter in a bedroom so that she doesn't go out. This is scientific quarantine, whereby you must have parameters that are measurable. and it must be supervised. And the question is, who is going to supervise this quarantine? Because in a scientific quarantine, you just don't give someone a blank check that you go and hide in your house. So, and that's why I said earlier, we need to be a bit careful on the statements that we make to the public, because instead of allaying anxiety, they increase the anxiety. Because this is a situation whereby, from a layman's point of view, to them, between them and the coronavirus is death. So we need to move further to reassure our citizens, especially with our public statements, to the extent that we don't increase that anxiety. We should give more facts than speculation.
So in other words, you're saying in Kenya we should not be talking about self-quarantine?
That is neither here or there, as long as it's measurable. It's neither here or there. But we need to go further, because some of the issues that really angered the citizens and the anxiety went up was some of these statements about self-quarantine, which are not really clearly defined. So, and you talk about self-quarantine, we don't even know where these people are. They're being said that they're somewhere in Mlolongo. And the next day you are seeing some of people like, look at them, are loitering around. So these are things that we need to be very careful when you talk about. They're very emotive issues.
All right. Maybe what's your take on the self-quarantine? Because again, the country, the government is also trying to borrow what other countries that have been affected are doing. And of course, avoiding contact with the people who are infected or suspected to have traveled in China is one of the ways, and it's working for other nations.
My take is this. Don't do something because someone has done it.
Okay.
They had reasons, and they had the machineries, and they know how to go about it. Coming on our side, based on now the mechanisms that we have and the machineries we have to ensure that someone is under self-quarantine is not sufficient.
What does it take?
Now, that is what I'm saying, even the machineries and even the practicality, it is not.
Okay.
It is not based on, look at our background society. Suppose this person came and he or she is traveling to the village. Because they are saying, we know where they are, and you haven't restricted the area to know that you will be here for a certain period of time, and then from there we will release you. They just say, you go, but make sure you don't interact, you don't move. I'm going to the village. Now look at this. You've been in town, you've gone to the village, at the end of the day you are being told self-quarantine. That is why, to me, yes, other countries have done it. They have their ways of doing it. But you can't borrow something that you know will not fit your system. Okay? That is why I'm saying on my side, it is not practical to do a self-quarantine. If they feel they should, then the moment these guys landed at JKIA, explain to them, these are the mechanisms, and they have so many go-downs there. They could have converted one, and then they do a quarantine there. With the medics that they say they have trained. And then once they are given a clean bill of health, they are released.
All right. And because you're saying that they should have done that at the airport, there have been calls, Alfred, by, of course, Kenyans to have the students who've been locked down, under lockdown in Wuhan City, that they should come back, some arguing that those people have been there for over now the 14 incubation period, and none of them have tested positive, so they should be allowed to come back. Maybe what's your take on that? Should we be talking about them coming back to the country?
I want to look at that first from a broader perspective of the sovereignty of a nation. I want to believe if you were to switch places, probably with Kenya and China, I wouldn't buy a situation whereby China would have allowed Kenya Airways plane to land in Beijing if the situation was opposite. So we also need to guard our sovereignty so that we reassure Kenyans of their safety and security. And so far as evacuation of our students from China is concerned, that should also be done scientifically, so that you don't put the nation in a situation that there'll be more anxiety over the same. So it's up to the experts to assess the situation and see the best way to first to ensure that our people who are there are safe, and how they can return home without increasing risks to them and the people who live with them.
Yeah. And of course, Boaz, your take on the same, because the government is saying it's monitoring the progress of the students and evaluating the possibility of having the risks that will be involved, the possibilities of having them back into the country. They have been sending them some cash, and of course today they said they'll be, through the embassy, be sending about 10 million shillings to just help them survive. Is that the way to go for the government, or should we be looking and emphasizing on them coming back to the country, considering what they are going through in China?
I think I will buy the same sentiments that my brother just said, that we need also to look at both sides.
Okay.
Because even if we were to, I know we as Kenyans, we are looking at those are our brothers, those are our sisters, they are our breadwinners, they are suffering on the other side, while they cannot be allowed back home, and yet there are some people who are, I know that is what is trending. But then the reality is, even if they were to be allowed back home, we'll still have the issue of their suspected cases, or there are people who have come in from China, even though they are Kenyans, but we also need to be alert that they have come from a prone area. The best part of this is that even as the government is monitoring, of course, the monitoring aspect, I'm assuming that it is in terms of their security, in terms of do they have their daily bread? Because the last time I checked, there was an interview in one of the stations, and they were like, I can only afford 1 million a day, which has now doubled because of the challenges they're undergoing. So we also need to look at this 10 million. It's going to serve how many people and for how long. Let it not just be by a word of mouth. Let it be realistic. Let them support as much as they can. Let them ensure that they are safe. And once everything is true, then we can have them in.
All right. Well said. And as we wind up, let's at least give Kenyans some tips on how to protect themselves from this virus. I know you're experts, you've read about, though you've not been trained about it, but I'm sure you've read about it. Alfred, let me begin with you. Maybe you can just tell us what this virus is all about, because you said the transmission is the one that is very sensitive. What it's all about, how it's transmitted, some of the few symptoms, and now before he could finish with the preventive measures.
I start by emphasizing on the fact that on the issue of our public statements, especially people from authority and leaders like us, that we should be very, very meticulous, we should be very, very scientific, and we should avoid issuing statements that have not been validated. That will go a long way to also reassure our citizens, because our citizens have been very, very anxious, and we should also avoid to take those actions that also increase that anxiety and vulnerability. On the specific questions of on the virus, it's the class of the deadly SARS and others, and as I said before, we call it it's spread through droplet infection, the cough, the sweat, and body fluid. And if I have to cough on this desk, and the fluid that comes from my mouth happen to land on this desk, and you come and touch. So that's how, in the simple man's language, that's how it's spread. And that's why we are emphasizing on hand washing. In fact, the best prevention of coronavirus is three, broken in three. 1, hand washing. 2, hand washing. 3, hand washing. Let us concentrate on that. And don't just wash your hand with water. Wash your hands with an antiseptic and a soap that, if possible, contains some level of alcohol. So that's what we are saying. We wish to urge our citizens that we will do all it can as a professional association and also the union representing nurses to ensure that we work with the government and do the best we can, because this is a very big challenge for the nation. But we want to do the best we can to ensure that we have minimal, we put our citizens to very, very minimal risk of contracting the disease.
All right, and he's talking about hand washing. There's also, we've seen people in China walking around with masks. Are these, is it a preventive measure? Should it be used? Should they be used by people without or with the virus, so that when you sneeze, you're not transmitting it to your colleague or the next person?
You see, I believe in China they're using because it's already confirmed. And since it is an airborne disease, and sneezing being one of the ways of transmitting, that is where they have taken the precaution of that everyone that should have a mask. Even the masks they're using, you can see they are simple masks. Even the ones we have there on those, they have the two sides on. If I'm the one who is infected, then I know on which side to use so that I prevent the other person from, or if I'm preventing myself from whoever I think could be a suspect, or from getting them from the environment. So these are some of the simple preventive measures that will be, or should be brought up so that the common mwananchi and even the health workers get to know. But the simplest and the most important is what my brother has insisted on: hand washing. When you visit the washrooms, make sure you've washed your hands with soap, running water. When you sneezed, we cover our mouths. Kindly make sure you also wash your hands. Yes.
All right, and that's all the time we had for the show tonight.
Can I add just something? According to the WHO report, there are still some questions about the coronavirus that have not been answered. So that's why we really need to be strict on the issue of prevention. And as health workers, we still emphasize that prevention is better than cure.
All right. Thank you so much. We've been speaking with Alfred Obengo, who is the chairperson for the National Nurses Association of Kenya. And of course, we also had Boaz Onchari, who is the chairperson for the Kenya National Union of Nurses, Nairobi branch. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making this show a success. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you all for watching our show tonight. I'm Purity Museo, and Baron Abuli has been assigned language interpreter, of course.